Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Tiffany has always been my constant, my North Star. We met in kindergarten, of all places. I can still picture her with those wild curls and that big, toothy grin, chasing me across the playground. She was fearless even then. I never imagined that same girl would become my world. We went through everything together: school dances, late-night study sessions, those awkward teenage years. When it came time to pick a university, there was no question we'd go together. She chose arts and history. Naturally, Tiffany has always been about storytelling and connecting the dots of the past. I went into science. It was the logical path for me, and honestly, I think it intrigued her how different our worlds were. She'd joke about how I'd end up wearing a lab coat while she'd wear a beret, scribbling poetry in a cafe somewhere. After university, we took our first real steps into adulthood. I landed a job at a pharmaceutical company, a big one. The kind of place that felt overwhelming and exciting at the same time. It was everything I'd worked for, but there were moments when I felt like a small cog in a massive machine. Tiffany, on the other hand, walked into her dream job at a magazine publication. I'd come home tired from meetings and data analysis, and she'd be buzzing with stories about her latest feature or some quirky artist she interviewed. Our lives have started to feel like two parallel tracks, running close but separate. We still have our late-night talks, where she curls up beside me with a cup of tea and asks me to explain some obscure science fact she read online. And I love hearing about her world, so full of creativity and color. She lights up when she talks about her work, her dreams, her plans for the future. At first, I was proud of Tiffany for how quickly she adapted to her new job. She worked hard, made a name for herself, and even found a group of friends who seemed to really click with her. But as time went on, I started noticing the shift in the way she talked and the people she surrounded herself with. Most of her new friends were these so-called liberal feminists, always ready to talk down about men as if we were some kind of plague on society. It wasn't just a few offhand comments either. They seemed to genuinely despise men. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt at first, thinking maybe I was misjudging them, but after a few interactions, my patience wore thin. These women would say things that were outright ridiculous, like how a wild bear would be a better companion than a man. I mean, come on. They'd laugh as if it was some kind of inside joke. But the venom behind their words wasn't hard to catch. I couldn't help myself when the conversations turned to their anti-men rhetoric. I'd ask pointed questions, ones they clearly weren't ready for, and watch as their smugness crumbled. I didn't enjoy humiliating them, but I also wasn't about to let them treat me like some kind of inferior species just because of my gender. Tiffany hated it when I spoke up, though. She'd give me that look, half frustrated, half embarrassed, and try to smooth things over. "They don't mean it like that," she'd say later, as if I wasn't fully aware of the tone and intent behind their words. But how could she not see the problem? These weren't just harmless jokes. They were tearing men down, and I was expected to sit there and take it. The more time she spent with them, the more I felt like I was losing her to their ideology. Our conversations changed. She started questioning things she'd never brought up before, as if she was trying to view me through their lens. It was maddening. I wasn't against women's rights or equality, far from it. But I wasn't about to stand by and let them poison Tiffany against me, against us. When Tiffany first brought up the idea of delaying the wedding, I felt my stomach drop. We'd been planning this for years. It was supposed to be the next big step in our lives together. Her tone was hesitant, and she kept saying things like, "I just need more time to think about what marriage really means." But I wasn't buying it. This wasn't her talking, it was them. The so-called feminist witches she surrounded herself with, filling her head with their anti-marriage nonsense. I couldn't hold back. I asked her straight up if this was their doing, if their warped ideas had gotten to her. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. That silence was louder than any answer she could have given me. I was furious. The woman I loved, the woman I planned to spend my life with, couldn't even give me a straight answer. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I just walked out. I needed air, space. Anything but sitting there and watching the distance between us grow. I didn't go home that night. I turned my phone off and stayed out, trying to wrap my head around what was happening to us. How could the woman who once talked about having a family and growing old together suddenly be questioning everything? By the time I turned my phone back on, there were dozens of missed calls and texts from her. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't want to lose me and that we could figure things out together. It wasn't easy, but hearing her say that she still wanted us made me relent. I went back the next morning. When I walked through the door, she looked like she hadn't slept. She hugged me, tight, like she was afraid I might disappear again. I didn't say much, just held her for a while. I wanted to believe her when she said she didn't want to lose me, but a part of me wondered how much of Tiffany was still Tiffany, and how much had been replaced by the voices of her so-called friends. A few months had passed, and things between Tiffany and me were better on the surface, but there was still an undercurrent of tension. She'd gone back to spending more time with her feminist friends, parroting their ideas like one of their loyal flying monkeys. I kept trying to ignore it, hoping she'd eventually see through their nonsense and come back to being herself. But that hope was wearing thin. One day, she came home with a bright, almost nervous energy and dropped a bombshell. "Russell," she said, "how would you feel about going to India?" "India?" I repeated, caught completely off guard. "Why India?" She explained that she and her friends were planning a research trip to study the lives of women there, how they navigate their roles in society, how they're challenging norms, that sort of thing. The excitement in her voice was genuine, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the Tiffany I fell in love with, the curious, passionate woman who wanted to explore the world and make a difference. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just another adventure cooked up by her friends, another way for them to fuel their agenda. "And you want me to come with you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Yes," she said, almost pleading. "I think it would be good for both of us. You'd get to experience something new, and maybe it would help us understand each other better." I wanted to say no. The last thing I wanted was to be stuck halfway across the world with her friends, listening to their lectures about the evils of men and the glory of wild bears, or whatever new nonsense they'd come up with. But the look in her eyes stopped me. She was asking, not demanding, not pushing, but asking. And deep down, I knew that if I said no, it might be another wedge between us. "All right," I said finally, my reluctance obvious. "I'll come with you." Her face lit up, and for a moment, it felt like the old days again. Maybe this trip would be good for us. Maybe it would remind her of who we were before her friends got in the way. Or maybe it would be the final straw. Either way, I figured it was better than sitting back and letting things crumble around us. The flight to India was long, and sitting there with Tiffany and her friends was less than comfortable. They were in their own little bubble, chattering about their research plans, laughing at inside jokes, and occasionally glancing my way as if I was some sort of alien tagging along. I tried to tune them out, focusing instead on the journey ahead. When we landed in Assam, I was struck by how breathtaking the place was. Rolling hills, dense forests, and a kind of quiet that felt like a world away from the chaos back home. For a brief moment, I thought maybe this trip wouldn't be so bad. Tiffany seemed happy, and her enthusiasm about the place was infectious. I wanted to believe this was just about the research and not something more. But later that evening, my doubts resurfaced. I was unpacking in the modest little guest house we were staying at when I heard voices outside. It was Tiffany and her friends. At first, it was just the usual chatter, but then their tone shifted, more hushed and serious. I crept closer to the window, just enough to hear them clearly. "Did you speak to him?" one of them asked. "Not yet," Tiffany replied. "I'll tell him tomorrow." "You need to," another chimed in. "That's the whole reason you brought him here. He can't escape from here." My heart sank. Escape from what? I stayed frozen in place, every instinct screaming at me to confront them, but I held back. If they saw me listening, I'd never get the full story. Instead, I stayed up most of the night, running every worst-case scenario through my mind. What was Tiffany planning? Why did she need to bring me all the way here to tell me something? And what did her friend mean by he can't escape from here? I was suspicious, worried, and more than a little scared. Whatever was coming, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. The next morning, the guard at the guest house approached us as we were getting ready to head out. His face was serious, almost grim, as he spoke in his heavily accented English. "A bear has been attacking people in the village nearby. Please stay cautious and avoid the forest trails. It's dangerous." Before I could react, Tiffany's friends broke into laughter. One of them joked, "Honestly, being with a bear sounds better than being with a man." The others chimed in with their own quips, giggling like schoolgirls at their cleverness. The guard, however, didn't find it funny. He straightened his shoulders, his expression unchanging as he looked directly at them. "I really hope you never have to meet a sloth bear," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "He will not kill you, but every second that he is with you, you will wish you were dead. Bear attack victims are scarred for life, physically, mentally. If he comes, you will wish there was a man to save you." The laughter died out quickly, their smug smiles replaced by a mix of awkwardness and unease. The guard's words lingered in the air, heavy and unshakable. I couldn't help myself. I smiled and caught Tiffany's eye. There was a flicker of something in her expression, maybe irritation or embarrassment. It was hard to tell. Guess not every man is so useless after all, I said lightly, but there was an edge to my voice. Tiffany didn't respond, just looked away, clearly uncomfortable. As we headed out for the day, the mood among her friends was noticeably more subdued. For once, their sharp tongues had been silenced, and I couldn't deny the small satisfaction I felt. But the guard's warning stayed with me. Out here, far from home, the rules were different. I couldn't shake the feeling that the dangers weren't just outside in the forest. They were within the very group I'd come here with. That evening, as Tiffany sat down across from me with a serious look on her face, I could already feel my heart sinking. We need to talk. Those 4 words always seemed to carry the weight of something irreversible, and I knew this wasn't going to end well. She hesitated for a moment before diving in. Russell, she began, I've been thinking a lot about us, about our relationship, and I feel like I need to experience other people. I've only ever been with you, and I think it's important for me to date other men before we take the next step. I want to delay the wedding. I sat there, silent, letting her words settle like stones in my chest. So this was what it had come to. I didn't yell, didn't argue. Instead, I asked her, my voice calm, so you want to date other men? She nodded, avoiding my eyes. All right, I said, keeping my tone measured. So that means I can date other women too? That got her attention. Her head snapped up, and I could see the agitation bubbling beneath her composed exterior. Before she could say anything, I continued, if it's good for you, then it's good for me. Equality of genders, right? Her expression faltered. She clearly hadn't expected that response. Reluctantly, she nodded, but the tension in her jaw was unmistakable. I pressed further, keeping my tone even. And what happens if I find someone better? Someone I don't want to leave? What if I don't want to get back together with you? Now she wasn't just agitated. She was outright defensive. Her voice rose, tinged with anger. As a woman, I've been from the oppressed gender. This isn't the same. I can date other men because I need to grow and experience life. But you need to stay faithful to me. That's different. She was practically frothing, her words spilling out in a rush of frustration and contradiction. I, however, remained calm, which only seemed to irritate her more. Tiffany, I said, leaning back slightly, if you truly believe in equality of genders, then it works both ways. You can't have one set of rules for yourself and another for me. That's not equality. That's bullshit entitlement. Her face flushed, and she looked like she was about to argue. But for once, she had no response. I listened to her crying, but my decision was made. This trip had been a setup from the start, her carefully orchestrated way of breaking this to me in an isolated place, where she thought I wouldn't have any choice but to accept it. It was clear she'd already thought this through, likely even made a list of the suitable men she wanted to experience while I sat back and played the fool. Standing up, I said calmly, since it seems you brought me all the way here just for this conversation, I can only assume you've already done your homework and have a list of potential candidates for your experience. My role here seems done. I'm heading back. I began packing my bags while she pleaded, her voice cracking as tears rolled down her face. Please, Russell, don't do this. Just think about it. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just need time. I don't want to lose you. I zipped up my bag and turned to her, keeping my tone steady. If you need time and a list, then I need to get started on my own. Unlike you, I didn't come prepared. I need to head back home to begin my experience. Her friends came in, likely alerted by the commotion, and started trying to reason with me. One of them stepped forward, her voice dripping with faux concern, trying to spin this as some sort of growth opportunity for all of us. I looked at her, unimpressed. You know, I said, my tone cutting, you have a great body. Maybe under different circumstances, I'd even consider sleeping with you. But the truth is, you're so ugly on the inside that I can't even stomach looking at you for long. The room went silent. Her friend froze, and Tiffany's tears turned into a shocked gasp. None of them had a reply to that. I called the guest house guard and asked him to help me arrange transport to another hotel. He nodded without question, his no-nonsense demeanor a small comfort in this absurd situation. The next morning, I boarded a flight back to the USA. Tiffany kept calling, her messages alternating between apologies and angry tirades, but I ignored every single one. I had nothing more to say. As the plane took off, I looked out the window, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what we'd lost, and relief that I wasn't going to let myself be strung along any longer. If she wanted to explore her options, that was her choice. But I wasn't going to wait around for her to decide whether I was worth coming back to. A day after I returned to the U.S., I got a message from one of Tiffany's friends, one of the so-called witches. It was a photo of another member of their group, her face pale and bruised, with an arm wrapped in bandages. The caption read, "The bear got her." Apparently, the sloth bear that the guard had warned us about had attacked her while she was exploring one of the forest trails. I later learned she needed 97 stitches just to hold herself together. It was poetic, in a grim sort of way, a brutal reminder of how reality doesn't care for their lofty ideologies. The group stayed in India for another week, but I was long gone by then. Back home, I had already decided I wasn't going to give Tiffany a second chance. She had made her choices clear, and I wasn't going to wait around to be her backup plan. I packed up all of her belongings, neatly labeled them, and had everything sent to her father's house. When I called her father to explain the situation, he surprised me by agreeing wholeheartedly. "If she wants to screw around, that's her decision," he said bluntly, "but no decent man would stick around for that." I would have done the same thing. Then, with a bitterness that matched my own, he added, "Given her new ideology, she probably hates me, too. When she comes for her stuff, she can leave my house just as quickly. She's made her bed. Now she can lie in it." A week later, Tiffany showed up at my door, looking exhausted and defeated. I opened it just enough to see her face, and she immediately started talking, her voice shaky and desperate. "Russell, please, I'm sorry," she began. "I made a mistake. Let's just talk." I cut her off before she could finish. "Tiffany, you did not make a mistake. You made a choice. There is a difference. You want to go out and increase your body count. Be my guest. I'll tell all my friends that you are ready to experiment. In fact, let me do it right now." I opened my social media page and posted, "Tiffany is no longer with me and is looking to hook up with different men every day. Please book your slots." Her phone pinged, informing that she got the notification. "All your stuff is at your father's place. You have nothing here anymore. This chapter is closed." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like she was about to argue. But before she could say another word, I stepped back and shut the door. For the first time in what felt like ages, I felt a sense of peace. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. Tiffany had made her choices, and I had made mine. Life would go on, and I'd find my way forward without the weight of her indecision dragging me down. A few months after the fallout with Tiffany, life had taken a brighter turn for Russell. He'd met someone new, a charming, down-to-earth woman who shared his interests and values. Their connection had been instant, and within weeks of dating, they decided to move in together. Life felt refreshing again, unburdened by the chaos and drama of his previous relationship. One evening, after a cozy movie night, Russell and his girlfriend were walking home, enjoying the cool air and the relaxed silence between them. As they rounded a corner, a commotion caught their attention. There she was, Tiffany. Her once put-together appearance was replaced by a disheveled, almost unrecognizable figure. She was wearing an outfit so revealing it left little to the imagination, stumbling drunkenly with two equally intoxicated women. The three of them were trying, and failing, to get off the ground, their actions clumsy and pathetic. Around them, a small crowd had gathered, phones out, live-streaming and laughing at the spectacle, some of them just touching them. Russell's girlfriend slowed her steps, concern flickering in her eyes. "Should we help them?" she asked softly, looking up at him. He stopped, glanced at the scene, and let out a small, humorless laugh. "Nah," he said with a shrug. "She wanted the streets, and now she belongs to the streets." His girlfriend gave him a searching look, but said nothing as they walked away. The image of Tiffany, lost and humiliated, lingered in Russell's mind for a moment, but only for a moment. He had moved on. She had made her choices, and this was the life she'd carved out for herself. Months later, Russell received an unexpected call from Tiffany's father. His voice was heavy with exhaustion and worry. "She overdosed," he said bluntly. "She's in the hospital." I just thought you should know. I'm not asking you to do anything. I know you've moved on. I didn't know who else to tell." Russell leaned back in his chair, the news sinking in slowly. A part of him wanted to feel something more. Regret, sympathy, maybe even anger. But all he could muster was a distant sense of pity. "Take care of her," he said simply, his tone devoid of emotion. After a pause, he added, "Not all friends are true friends. Maybe she'll figure that out one day." He ended the call and put his phone down, turning back to his girlfriend, who was reading on the couch. She glanced up at him, sensing something had shifted. "Everything okay?" she asked. Russell nodded, giving her a small smile. "Yeah, just a reminder of why I'm grateful for where I am now." With that, he He left the past where it belonged, behind him, and focused on the life he was building with someone who truly valued him. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.